On the line with us, Charles Sauer, the libertarian economist and president of the Market Institute. He's the author of Profit Motive, What Drives the Things We Do. And he's the host of a new podcast, Pardon My Parsing, that you can find at buzzsprout.com, marketinstitute.org, and Charles Sauer, S-A-U-E-R, on Twitter. Charles, welcome back to the program. So how is it that the Republican Party can justify wanting to refuse to pay the bills that Donald Trump ran up?
Well, I think that there's two answers here, and I like the way that you frame that. But look, Donald Trump spent a lot of money in response to COVID. He would have spent more if the Democrats had their way. We only slowed down spending once Joe Biden saw that the economy was going into an inflationary spiral. And we can fight about what the inflation was and what it's really caused by. But the fact is, and this is where it really comes down to, is this isn't about spending. It's not about anything. This is about procedure, and this is about Congress. This is one of the few times that the Republicans can actually take a stand and have Joe Biden respond to their ideas. The new Republican House could pass a dream bill, and Joe Biden and the Senate could just look the other way, but not on this issue. And so I think that that's why we're going to see a fight. It doesn't have anything to do with Trump and Trump spending. This is just procedure and Capitol Hill. It's not procedure, though. I mean, this is, you know, the Constitution says that Congress can appropriate money and spend money. When Congress appropriates money and spends that money, the executive branch has to write the checks. And all this legislation from 1917, the Liberty Bond bill, did, and it was never used before Newt Gingrich came along in 1995 in this way. All it did was say that, you know, the debt has to be anticipated, basically, you know, the so-called debt ceiling. But in effect, the way the Republicans are using it is like, you know, if you and I, Charles, were having lunch in a nice restaurant in Washington, D.C., and you know, the guy brings the check and we say, I don't think we're going to pay that check. We had a nice lunch, though. Thank you very much. Or, you know, somebody buys a card, puts it on their credit card, and then when the credit card bill comes, they say, you know, I'm not going to pay that credit card. This has nothing to do with policy. This is, you know, they're threatening to crash our government if Democrats won't go along with cutting Social Security and Medicare. It's a totally wrong way to go about trying to accomplish policy goals. Well, let's reset that frame. If we're both sitting at that table and we're arguing over who's going to pay for the bill, in this instance, we're both going to sit at that table until somebody figures it out. So in this case, the Republicans get to say, we're going to fund this bill, but you have to make some concessions so that we can fund government in the future years. We've talked about this before, but look, Social Security is the last 13 reports have said it's going to go broke by 2030. This is something that we need to address, and it's something we need to talk about. But if you don't want to talk about real fights, then no, they should just put their blinders on and pass whatever. Okay, first of all, lest we panic people, the going to go broke rhetoric is over the top, Charles. The Social Security Administration has said that at some point, and there's different numbers out there from 2030 to 2040, at some point the trust fund will be exhausted and Social Security will only be able to pay 70 to 90% of benefits. So it's not going to go away. It's not going to go broke. They would have to cut back on benefits. The simple solution to that is to simply raise the cap so that millionaires, multimillionaires, and billionaires pay the exact same percentage of their income into Social Security as people like you and I do, I'm assuming. And that's, again, why we're having this fight, because that's false math. So the Republicans want to sit at the table and have a real discussion about the facts. And the only time that they can force the Democrats to the table is a fight like this. So why is it false math, what you're talking about? You can't just raise the ceiling and boom, you've solved everything. Sure you can. You have to then make a decision whether you pay for those rich people to get the increased benefits that they're paying for, or whether you turn Social Security into a welfare system. And you and I have agreed that seems like that's a reasonable plan, is to give that money to poor people, but it still doesn't solve your cap issue. And also they are broke. It's just that they're still making income. I think, Charles, if I invited you to lunch, or if we just agreed to have lunch and we had a nice lunch and you know, the assumption was we were going to split the bill, and then the bill comes and I said to you, you know, I just don't want to pay my part of this bill until you agree to something that I'm demanding. until you let me, borrow your car for a week or something. At that point, I don't think you'd be very happy with me.
Well, this isn't about being happy with the other person.
At that point, I think you would feel like you had been lied to.
This doesn't have anything to do with that.
Yeah, but it's a fundamentally dishonest thing to do.
No, if we're going to go split a check and you order appetizers and the lobster tail and the steak and the dessert, I have a reason to be mad when I'm paying my part of the bill. When you want to give extra Social Security benefits to people, when you want to expand Medicaid when it's not treating the people who Medicaid was intended for, then I have a right to demand you discuss that and debate me on the floor. And I don't care if we're friends at the end of the debate. If I'm fighting for the American people and the poor people that have been passed by because you want to keep expanding the rolls instead of serving the people that need to get it.
Okay, so let's move from the lunch metaphor to reality here. Republicans are talking about damaging the United States of America. This is what happened in 2011 when they walked right up to the brink of default with trying to do the same thing to Obama. They never do it to Republican presidents. Reagan tripled the national debt. He spent more money. In fact, he ran up more debt than every president from George Washington to Jerry Ford combined. Nobody said a peep. They raised the debt ceiling over and over and over again throughout the Reagan and Bush administrations. Clinton comes into office, and suddenly they're hysterical about the so-called debt ceiling. Bush comes into office. They raise the debt over and over, the ceiling over and over and over again. Obama comes into office. Suddenly they're hysterical about it. Trump comes into office. They raise it over and over and over again. Biden comes into office, and suddenly they're hysterical about it. I mean, there's a pattern here. And holding the full faith and confidence, the trust in the American political system, economic system, hostage is these guys aren't just fighting over who's going to pay the check. They are literally holding you and me and every other American hostage, and our country. I mean, we've got the reserve currency for the world. If we default on the debt, if our treasury bills go from never defaulted ever in 245 years to suddenly, yes, there's been a default, it's going to shake the entire world's economic system. It could provoke a worldwide depression. What kind of idiot would do that?
So you're on the side of not worrying about spending no matter which president's in.
This is not about spending, Charles. This is about paying bills.
All of those presidents.
This is not about spending.
Stood up to all of them.
This is not about spending. This is about paying the bills from previous spending. You want to have a battle about spending? Do it when you come up with the federal budget. The federal budget defines how much is going to be spent. That's the budget. That's something that Congress agreed to.
The federal budget isn't binding by anybody, so it's a way to put out your message.
It absolutely is.
It's law. Do anything.
No,
this is a way to actually have a discussion on Capitol Hill and figure out what's going on. No, look at the federal budget. By the time it gets passed, there's just numbers. It's non-binding. That's the problem.
It is binding. The Constitution, Article 1, Section 9 says, or Section 7, I forget, says, the Congress can appropriate money for expenditures and raise taxes, period. And the budget is where the Congress tells the administration how much money to spend and where to spend it. And that's the appropriate venue for a debate about spending. If you want to cut Social Security or Medicare or something, do it during the budget debates. But after you've already agreed to spend this money, after you've already taken the F-35s and built the freeways and done whatever you've done, and the bill comes due, and to say no, we're not going to let you write the check, it's not only disingenuous, I think it's frankly, politically and morally criminal to hold the full faith and credit of the United States hostage for politics.
Well, I think that when we're talking about history, it's almost criminal just to stop and not talk about the way that these policies, the way that the procedures have progressed since those days. But if we want to stay back there, we can go back and talk about the procedural gamesmanship that happened in the first Congresses and what they did. They would vote that they were there, and then they would leave so that there wouldn't be enough present to actually take a vote. This sort of gamesmanship is what politics is about. And it is one of those things that elections have consequences. The American people wanted somebody to put a stop to what the Biden administration is doing. So when you're saying that this is criminal and this is ignorant, you're talking about a majority of the American people that wanted this to stop. They wanted the spending of the left to stop.
Charles,
and they wanted somebody to do
please
something
name
about it.
one time in our history when any political party, any politicians outside of the debt ceiling with Republicans have threatened to crash the economy of the United States if they don't get their way.
Oh, I am sure that there's examples from the early Congresses.
I don't believe
You're going to have to give me a few on that one. But just hearing the gamesmanship and what is, I've read all of the history of those early days, but I was paying more attention to the procedural stuff instead of what the public policy was that they were fighting. I'll look it up for you. I'm sure that there's examples, because the procedural things that we're going through now are nothing compared to what they were going through back when they were first learning how to run our country. So just to say this hasn't happened really is not doing a service to what is happening and the fight that needs to happen in this discussion.
Okay. Charles Sauer, he's the author of Profit Motive, and he's got a new podcast, Pardon My Parsing, at buzzsprout.com. Thank you, Charles, for dropping by.
Thank you.